Hello, I'm Odin, and today I'm going to make another requested prop. It's Bakugo's Gauntlets from My Hero Academia. As a place to start, I decide how wide the front diameter needs to be. Let's do 14, so I got some space for a glove. I start to sketch out the basic shape that I want, marking the measurements that I know, and taking new ones as I need them, until I have a really good idea of the barrel shape that I'm after. I only want to cut 4 pieces for each gauntlet. My plan is to take the circumference of each of the diameters and divide that by 4 and make a uniform pattern piece that I can just repeat. I'm still guessing on some of the curves, so I do a test on some floor mat foam first, gluing just one together. I check the fit, right? Okay, so I'm gonna redo. Let me figure out what this angle is. To correct the scalloped edge, I trace a new flat line on my test piece. Then I'll cut off that piece and use it to change my pattern for version 2. And this one has much better ends, but it's still too egg-shaped. So there's quite a difference between the two. Not so much in height. And the cut's perfect. Okay. Which of course made it lower. I think I am going to redo the pattern one more time. I'm going to reduce the inside diameter just a little bit, and we'll go for it. And I'm betting the third time is going to be right, so I start cutting my pieces from some 10mm HDfoam. I need 2 of each piece for one arm, and after I cut all the big pieces, I heat them and start to form them on a planishing stake. Medieval armor was curved in a very similar way. Now with foam, I just want a compound curve, so the parts will glue together much easier. I use 2 layers of contact cement on each seam, painting on the first layer and letting it dry, and then I apply a second coat to each piece. And when the second coat is dry, then I can stick the parts together, because contact cement does not stick when it's wet. You need to let it dry first. All the pieces are uniform, so I don't need to mark them. I just need to make sure the ends line up. I realize I need to stop and make the center circle for my hand to fit through. I never did make this part of the test piece. 18, that's about what I wanted it to be. I cut some 20cm squares and I draw an X in the center. And I use my bandsaw to cut a pair of circles. I need to cut a hole. Well, I'm kind of stuck with a hole that my hand will go through. Well, that's about the same as what my arm's gonna be. I tape my piece to some scrap foam and then place the cut-off edge back around it, because that'll hold up my CosTools circle cutter. The inside hole can be cut with this guy really easily. The first outer circles were just a little too big. Glue the circles to the short half and then glue the 2 halves together. There are fragmentation squares on the outside of the gauntlets, so I use some aluminum foil and some duct tape to get the shape of one of the larger foam pieces. I carefully draw out the squares I want directly on the duct tape, trying to leave uniform room between the squares. I could use rubbing alcohol to erase the lines, but this time I'm just going to draw an X on the parts that I want to keep. I remove the foil pattern and then cut out the squares. I check them and I just keep the best looking set of 4, and those are the ones I'm going to use. I trace that set onto some cardstock, making a usable pattern, and then I can start cutting lots of little pieces of foam. I use as much 10mm scrap that I can. These squares are so small it's easy to get them cut from most scrap foam. I need 48 squares to cover both gauntlets, and cutting this much foam dulls the blade. A knife sharpener is a great tool to have. It beats throwing away razor blades constantly. I save the ends of the foil pattern as well. By tracing out the bottom edge 4 times, I get a pattern piece I can use on some 2mm foam. And this becomes the bottom trim, and it's a good starting point for the squares. It's too long, of course, so I trim it to shape. And I can start to place on the squares. I numbered them by row, starting at the bottom, and I wrote the number on them correctly to show which way goes up. The only difficult part was keeping the spacing consistent between the squares. There is a larger trim piece that wraps around the top. and I trace that last part of the foil pattern and cut a pair from 2mm foam. I did a test fit of the trim, and I need to add extra strips to the sides of the cup. Then I can glue on the 2mm top trim, and I still have 10mm foam behind all of it. Once everything is glued in place, I can cut the extra 10mm foam off, and that way it'll fit the 2mm foam. To clean up all the cut marks, I use a rotary tool and a sanding drum. It removes the cut marks very quickly. And I also sand down the top corners because they were curving up just a little too much. Add some 2mm trim around the front of the cuff, and I can start figuring out the pattern for the lever on the grenades. Now, it needs to be longer and have more of a curve. Let me try that again. Yeah, that'll work out. Might need to leave a little extra on that end so it sticks out a little more. That'll work out. Okay, that'll work. I trace out 4 on some 10mm foam. I don't want flimsy little levers. And to bulk them up even more, I made a side piece. It's just a long tapered part that will fit between each half of the lever. There's a hole that goes on top of each lever. I have a mark for where it needs to go, so they'll be the same. You definitely want a sharp blade for these cuts, because it can be really hard to keep the line straight on a thin piece this long. I'm surprised I got all 4 cut out the first time. With all the parts made, I can start gluing the levers together. The outside piece I line up with the top lever, where it will eventually glue with the rest of the gauntlet. I carefully work my way down the side, keeping the parts from warping and lining the edges up as close as I can. For the inside piece, I start at the bottom, lining the points up first, because the top will need to be trimmed off anyway. Because I'm going to put a hole here, I want to put a backing plate behind it. That way I can drill through the top layer and it'll pull out. But I don't want to make any holes until it's all glued together because I don't want to stretch it and deform the hole. After I glue the plate in, I glue on the other side of the lever. This is hard to do, but make sure the outside corners are lined up first and then work the inside seam in place. It seems that parts this skinny would just stick all at once, but I was able to do it one side at a time. The result is a pretty good little box shape without any need for internal support. Good. I trim the inside edge because this is where the levers will glue to the gauntlet. Wrong side. So, why is this not working? Oh yeah, because that's completely the wrong side. Fool. Chances are it's going to be nicer if all this gets glued on after it's painted. Yeah, I think I'm going to be happier if I do that. Well, that's going to be interesting. And I make a pattern for the lever pivot. I'll need 2 sets for each gauntlet. I sand down the rounded cut to make it smoother, and I press the end of the sanding drum against the foam. This makes an interesting rounded mark, which I need. I had made a guide dot on the pattern to help me place them all correctly. I round off the inside corner of each part. It'll help the lever look separate when they're all glued together. I sand down the glue seams and the uneven edges on both sides of each lever. I beveled the inside of each piece as well. Now they'll fit the curve of the gauntlet. I use a sanding block to smooth out the tool marks. I only sand in one direction. It just looks smoother. If you sand back and forth, the foam just gets fuzzy. I set the parts so the top edge matches, and I trace where I need to glue them together. That way, I can glue them on without a lot of extra glue showing. Now that I have all the parts together, I'll use the Krause tool's hole drill to make the hole that goes on top of each lever. I mark where this piece is going to glue to the gauntlet and number them to match them up later. I cover these sections with tape so no paint will get here. It'll be a better glue seam that way. Okay. All right, I've got everything with a basic black coat. It's a black Plasti Dip and some matte black spray paint. I need to start taping things up so I can start spraying stuff silver. I fully tape the inside of each cup because that needs to stay black. And I carefully tape off all the fragmentation squares. Now this was kind of tricky, and I expect to do some black touch-up painting later because silver's going to get under some of these tape seams. A little over an hour later, everything is masked off for silver spray paint. All right. And that's almost it for the levers. Just remove the tape. And I can remove all the tape from the gauntlets. I apply the first coat of some artist's acrylic green paint. Now I thought this stuff would cover better over the black, but when it dried, it was nearly just black again. So I got the green on. It took 3 coats of paint to get it to be this level of green. The first one, because it was a black background, basically disappeared. But I put on 2 more coats of some craft paint, and I'm happy. I'm gonna put some gloss coat over this, and then I can glue them together. For the gloss coat, I'm gonna use some Mod Podge. It'll remain flexible, which is good because these will get knocked around when they're worn at a con. On each lever, I paint the inside of the holes black and thin the paint with some rubbing alcohol to do a very simple wash on the pivot circles. And I'll put some along the seam where the pieces meet. Glue the levers to the back of each gauntlet, and they're ready to go. So the gauntlets are pretty much done, but there's a piece I think I need, and that's the gloves. That'll really kind of finish the whole thing. It won't just be a pair of hands, right? So I have a pair of work gloves I'm going to start with. He's got some armor I need to glue on the back, and then the palms are supposed to be red. I was reading that in order to paint leather, I need to make sure I have the waterproof removed. I've never painted leather before. So that's definitely waterproof. And this one, I have managed to remove the majority of the waterproofing. All I gotta do is wipe the thing down with rubbing alcohol. So I also rubbed down the other glove with some rubbing alcohol. It really seems like it should be more difficult than this to remove waterproofing. And I'll use an acrylic paint thinned 50-50 with rubbing alcohol as a primer for each glove. The rubbing alcohol helps the paint seep into the leather of the glove. I got paint on my hands while doing this. Being a person who considers himself terminally right-handed, this is probably a good exercise for me. The instructions I read said to let the gloves dry for about an hour, and then I can paint with the normal acrylics. Now, to be honest, if I had this shade of red in leather paints, I would have just used it. And after I let the gloves dry again, I use some 4mm HDfoam for the plating that goes in the back of each glove. I trace where to glue and stick on the back plate. And I put on each finger as one long piece. Then I carefully cut each knuckle open to allow the glove to flex. Now I'm only cutting the foam, not the leather. I heat seal the foam, and this also opens the knuckles a little bit more. And since I'm not painting the green over black, it only took 2 coats of the green paint. I'll also cover these with a gloss coat so they'll match the gauntlets. It went on easier than I thought it would. And I've got Bakugo's gauntlets from My Hero Academia. All right, these things are more fun to wear than I thought they would be. I actually thought they'd be cumbersome, right? I thought I would bang them on the table or on the door jambs. No, I'm able to walk around pretty much just fine with these things on. I was even able to start and stop the camera while wearing these. So, not nearly as big of a deal as I thought they would be. And if you wanted to make a set for yourself, well, you can. All the pattern pieces you saw me make during this whole video, I put them all together into a file, and you can download them from a link in the description. And it's free, so just go for it. Make your own set and have fun and see how interesting these things are to wear. This isn't going to be my last prop build from My Hero Academia. This is just the first. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite you guys to leave a comment below and let me know what you would like to see next. What thing from a UA student or what thing from one of the villains would you like to see me build in a future video? It's not going to be the next one, but it'll be a next one coming up. And I'm going to take a look at those, and we're going to pick one out, and we'll put it together because this is how Odin makes. That's not what I'm making. I want to thank Matt Kelly, Scott Marshall, and all of my Patreon supporters. You guys really do make this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.